All right, so that means all of you, like, you know how much credit card debt you have, you know what your mortgage is. On top of all that, your quota of what the federal government owes people in the rest of the world is about $30,000. And if you have a kid, he owes $30,000 too, right? So that gives you some idea. But that, you say, oh, okay, well, gee, okay, Bob, are you done? No, I'm not done yet. I got a few more. Why is that, again, optimistic? Why is that underplaying how bad it is? Because that number, when they throw around in the press and talk about the federal debt, what that refers to is it's the strict accounting, like the actual bonds issued by the government. It's not all of the government's financial liabilities. So let me just try to water this down and make it real simple. You know, if you're running a business, obviously, and you borrow money, like you sell a bond and say, whoever buys this, we will give you $10,000 next year. Obviously, that's a liability, and that represents, and if you got $9,000 this year for that, that would be like a $9,000 deficit, okay? Because your indebtedness went up, you just sold a bond, that person now has a claim on your future revenues, all right? So that's, when they talk about the federal debt, normally the figure they have in mind is that. It's just referring to treasury bonds that people in the private sector hold or other governments hold, all right? But the government, of course, is on the hook for a lot more than just the official bonds it's issued. Like, it's made obligations through Medicare and Social Security. It's promised a lot of people the U.S. federal government will be sending you checks at some point down the road. And, they don't necessarily have, they actually kind of do have the force of law, but the government can change what it is. So the point is, if you look at what's called generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP, if you run the liabilities of the federal government as if it were a business and had to comply with normal accounting standards, right now the federal debt is not merely just that 7 or 8 or 9 trillion that I mentioned. It's more like 66 trillion, okay? So that would work out to about $220,000 per person in the United States, okay? So now keep in mind, that's just saying like what we're all on the hook for in terms of what Uncle Sam has promised people. So you don't have to pay your taxes and then you owe that on top. Like, that includes, the point is, that's kind of what Uncle Sam needs to suck out of us in terms of our lifetime, the present value right now. That's what that figure means. But, so not that makes it an easier pill to swallow. I'm just trying to get you to see what that number is. But it's about $220,000 per person in the country is how much the federal government's on the hook for. Okay, so I think you can all see, obviously, there's no way they're going to pay that off. They can't possibly. So what's going to happen? They're going to just default on those things, right? They're going to, they probably wouldn't just default on actual treasury bonds. They would probably do things like push back the retirement age. So when you can start collecting Social Security benefits, they'll probably push that back. So that's one way, if you think about it, that's the one way they would cut back on what the government technically is telling people we're going to pay you. All right, so they're going to do things like that, or pensions or what have you. That's one way they're going to do it. So as far as, one reason to be against Obamacare, besides all the other 9 different reasons you could list, another one is because once the government is in charge of paying doctors for your medical care, they're going to run out of money, right? They're just going to have to cut corners because they can't afford it. And this is, of course, with the issue with all the so-called death panels and so on. That's true. And you see guys like Paul Krugman and others, he gets real frustrated, and he says, these Republicans, they don't take into account all the cost-saving measures. And, the cost-saving measures are, we're not going to pay so much for people's health care. They're going to have government officials decide whether, it makes sense, can we afford to keep all these people getting all this treatment that they deem is unnecessary or medically unnecessary. All right, so that stuff's all coming. Now, how does this all, I'm running out of time here, so I'll speed it up. How does this all tie in with the Federal Reserve? Well, here, let me just pause and say I have been blown away. I know Tom has been as well. Just seeing Ron Paul go in front of college audiences and have 20-year-olds get up and start chanting, "End the Fed." That just blew me away. I would have thought, before seeing it happen, that if you wanted to, with a sort of libertarian message, if you want to get college kids fired up, you would have to go there and say, let's legalize pot, right? I would have thought that was the only thing you could possibly do. But no, he says, I know, I'm going to talk to them about central banking. So, I mean, that just you know, it wouldn't even occur to me to try that. All right, so, because I have been a college professor, and like it's certainly people weren't chanting "end the Fed." They were chanting "end the lecture" when I was doing it. All right, so let me encourage you guys. It's really, and it really is amazing. People come out on a weekend to hear the stuff that's a little bit esoteric. So it's always very encouraging. And let me just sort of remind you of why that's important, because I know Tom has done it too. I mean, we've been interacting with other groups like tea parties and stuff. On April 15th, I gave a talk in Cincinnati, the big Fifth Third Arena there, with a bunch of tea party people. And they were, they know something's wrong, okay? And a lot of them are real, like you would call them conservative, and some of them homeschool their kids. So they're coming from the right background to be receptive to our kind of message. And yet, I'm looking at before the event started, the filing into the stadium, and on the big screen there, they were showing slideshows, and they were showing things like Nancy Pelosi would come up and everyone's going boo, right? And then they flashed Ron Paul, and in fairness, it was the picture where he's like at his desk and he's kind of out of focus, and the thing that's in focus is the thing that says, don't steal, the government hates competition. All right, so it was that picture. So in fairness, I think maybe the people it wasn't obviously Ron Paul, but there was no crowd reaction. They didn't boo him, thank goodness, but they didn't, go nuts. And so that kind of concerned me. And then they put up a picture of George Bush and Dick Cheney, and the place goes nuts. Like, wow, right? And what's funny is, talking to the people, they were real mad about what they called Obama's bailouts, okay? And so it's like, so anyway, what I'm getting at with this is that there really is a role. I mean, I think a lot of these people, they don't know why. And, I listen to Rush Limbaugh when I'm in the car, but I think it's because a lot of people are trying to channel that anger into, we got to watch out for these Democrats, these big government Democrats. And then just by default, that means the Republicans are the good guys, as opposed to, preaching the choir here. You know where I'm going with this. So anyway, my point is, there are a lot of people out there, they know something's wrong, and they're just angry, and they don't know how to channel it, because they just don't have the background. The people they listen to don't, they don't even know these issues. And so it takes a little bit of courage, there's a lot out of your comfort zone sometimes. I mean, I know if I'm in a group of people, I don't like to go out on a limb and, at a cocktail party or something and say something, because I don't know where people are coming from. You don't want to ruffle feathers. But, in this kind of environment, I mean, it really is important that you yourself are so well versed in the facts that you can explain to people, exactly what's going on with the Federal Reserve or whatever the particular issue is. Because I think a lot of people, the point's not necessarily to convince the guy who's going to start arguing with you at the cocktail party. The point is, the 10 people who are standing around who don't really know, and they're not going to say anything because they know they haven't read on it, if you trounce the other person, well, those are the people you're going to convince, or at least intrigue them, and maybe they'll go read more. All right, so again, I would just encourage you, the fact that you're here, I mean, that means something, that you're a type of person that wants to learn more and go out and spread the word. So as corny as it is, I mean, it really does matter. It can't just be Ron Paul doing it because he can only reach so many people. It takes people writing letters to the editor and just talking to people and trying to channel it. Because again, it's not like we need to wake people up anymore. Everybody knows something is seriously screwed up. They don't know exactly what it is, and they don't know how to fix it. And so I really think this is our opportunity. Unfortunately, I mean, I'd like to be able to say, if we could just convince enough people, then the next election will turn it all around, and this won't be the next Great Depression. I mean, if you want to shoot for that, I'd like to be pleasantly surprised. I think it's unavoidable at this point. I think the forces are in motion, but at the very least, the more people you can educate, at least if the crash does happen, then everyone will know exactly what happened, as opposed to after the fact just trying to come up with explanations. Because I'm sure the government's not going to say, oh my gosh, we're so sorry. All right, you know what, next time let's try freedom. We screwed up. That's not what they're going to say.